Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. Let me make sure I'm up. I'm seeing green, so I'm going to be optimistic and assume that the world is fucking awesome. Yes, good. And let me check one more. Yeah guys, I check this each time because, like I said, I've done shows before where the entire show, the sound was off. And so it's freaked me out and it's made me paranoid, so I always check. Alright, so this one is not going to be too long. I'm going to try to go through this one relatively quickly. First, just to get a few announcements out the way, it's like 1:52 in the morning, so like I said, this one is not going to be long, and I'm feeling myself kind of winding down. On Wednesday, I have two really good shows coming up on Wednesday. I have Hard Bastard. Hard Bastard is sort of right. Talks a lot about media and the bullshittedness that comes with media. And Grant Cameron. A lot of my interviews are people that I bring on because I think the audience would like to talk to them, but also me, meaning I enjoy talking to them. It's this kind of benefit of both. One of the best things about having your own show is you can try to get people to come onto your show under the pretense of, hey, come onto my show, so the audience can see you. In some cases, though, it's, oh, please come onto my show, I just want to talk to you. Grant is that guy for me. That's the guy who was like, oh, please come onto the show, I want to talk to you. I've sent him multiple requests, and I kind of just sucked it up. It's like, fuck, he's not going to come on. And out the blue, he hit me up. It was like, hey, yeah, I'll come on. As long as I can put it on my channel a week after, I can come on. So I fucking A. So that is going to be amazing. Grant Cameron is a UFO investigator that focuses on these ideas of consciousness. He is amazing. So both of those shows should be damn good. I want to talk about Seth Rich. And I'm going to make an argument for this. And this is not something I typically talk about. And it's funny, as I say this, I'm pretty sure there's going to be some people whose asses collectively pucker up. I'm going to make an argument, and my argument is basic and straightforward. If Robert Mueller does not investigate the Seth Rich case, then Robert Mueller is not really doing a real investigation. And for all intents and purposes, this is just political theater. What I mean by that is he's going further into the case coming up, dealing with DNC hacking. If Robert Mueller does not investigate the Seth Rich case, then Robert Mueller is not actually doing an investigation. This is all political theater. Even if the investigation is just there to exclude Seth Rich as being one of the sources of the DNC leaks, then you need to at the very least have an investigation to make that exclusion. But going with the narrative and assuming that this is the Russians and so everything else flows in line with this kind of Russian narrative stuff, it's not an actual investigation that is going by political theater. This is kind of my point. There's too much evidence that points to this thing that he could have potentially been the leaker. And you have multiple people, multiple credible people. Seymour Hersh, award-winning journalist, Seymour Hersh comes out in a document saying, and you can hear his own voice talking to someone saying that Rich was the leaker. In fact, I'll play that clip for you. Julian Assange has alluded to this idea of Rich being the leaker. Even Kim.com, who I don't necessarily know all that much about, but he's been pushing extraordinarily hard, saying he will reveal evidence showing that Rich was the leaker. I'm saying you have multiple people saying this guy was the leaker. How can you completely ignore the fact in your investigation of something like this? Now, I'm going to make a few arguments with this, and I'm going to build this up in a way because I want to be very clear on what I'm talking about. And I want to be very specific because I don't want what I'm saying to be taken into the weeds. I want it to be very specific and precise. Sometimes I have a tendency to fuck up my words, in which case it comes across as a wrong impression. I don't want that to take place here. There's been so much that has been heaped onto this, I don't necessarily want to add to what's been heaped onto this. One of my subscribers asked me to talk about this very specific case, and I typically shy away from this case because it's, at a certain point I felt like people were bathing in this person's misery, in which case I didn't necessarily want to pile into that. Even though it was one of those things where I don't necessarily know how you get away from it. I don't know how you get away from it if you're having a conversation about the DNC leaks. So, the first point. Back during, this was, let's see, JFK files. JFK file reveals CIA plan to stage bombing, then blame Castro. This is a slight detour, but I kind of want to make a point as my first point. A newly declassified document shows the CIA considered a plan in the early 1960s to plant bombs in Miami, slaughter Cuban refugees, and assassinate Cuban exiles, all in a bid to turn the world opinion against Cuban leader Fidel Castro. The document was one of nearly 3,000 files related to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy made public last week. A memo to the top military general Maxwell Taylor in April of 1962 describes planning for Operation Mongoose, a covert program aimed at subverting and overthrowing the Cuban Revolution. Part of the document reads, "The terror campaign could be pointed at Cuban refugees seeking haven in the United States. We could sink a boatload of Cubans en route to Florida, real or simulated. We could foster attempts on lives of Cuban refugees in the United States, exploding a few plastic bombs in careful chosen spots." Another portion of the memo describes plans to unleash biological and chemical agents on Cuban farms in a bid to cause crop failures. They were trying to create a revolution in Cuba. They were trying to go after Castro. The wild part about this is if the CIA had went through with this, if they had killed a bunch of Cubans, if they had killed people in Florida in order to create the pretext, in order to go into Cuba, the news media would have said, "Oh my God, look at what the Cubans did." The politicians would have screamed, "Oh my God, look at what the Cubans did." One person after the next, even some lefties, would have been talking about invading Cuba and attacking Cuba. Very few people would have said, "Wait a minute, the United States wanted to go into Cuba in the first place, and this is extraordinarily weird that Cuba would do something like this." Those people would get called conspiracy theories, and those people would get set to the corner saying they were loony, and that clearly the media is telling you that this is what the Cubans did. How dare you not believe the mainstream media as they tell you that you need to be able to go to war with Cuba? This is what they would be saying. This is literally what they will be telling the press right now. I mean, what the press will be telling the audience and American public right now. The only reason they wanted to do this is because they wanted pretext. They understood that in the public's consciousness, they would have towed the water, and they would have gotten their pretext to go into Cuba. The point I'm making here is what's considered to be a conspiracy theory, or what's considered to be the mainstream narrative, usually boils down to the mainstream thought, the amount of money that's backed into a particular story, not necessarily on the veracity of the story. Fact is, the further away you are from something, the more ambiguous that thing is. There is no way for me to exactly know what took place. By the same token, there is no way for any of these people to know what exactly took place. We're all behind this kind of a planet behind a glass of sorts, looking at this stuff from a distance. The honest position here is, I don't know, but I lean towards one side or the other, while at the same time acknowledging that I don't particularly know. My position on this has never changed, meaning this has always been the position I take on pretty much all information that I come in contact with, regardless of what the subject is. I accept as a flat fact that it is impossible for me to know. By the same token, I accept that there are going to be times I get it wrong, there are going to be times I get it right, there are going to be times I'm going to be somewhere between, but I don't know. It's honest to say I don't know. The media doesn't do that. And oftentimes, people who are trying to push a particular narrative don't do that. They've monetized reality, and they've monetized reality in a way to get you to buy into certain things that are more advantageous to them. Now, I make this point just to get across this idea of the reality of this is impossible to know. The reality is impossible to know. What we do know is there are certain people who are either connected to this or close to this. They'd either alluded to, insinuated, or pointed to Seth as being the leaker. That's what we know. Now, whether he was a leaker or not, I don't know. But I would make the case that neither do they. They've pushed a Russian hacking narrative, and that narrative has slipped and slid all over the place. Trump and Russia. Okay, we can't find Trump and Russia. Well, Russia. Let's just go with Russia. Trump colluded with Russia. Trump and Putin worked together in order to hack the DNC. Then, when they couldn't necessarily make that stick, all of a sudden WikiLeaks became a Russian actor. When they couldn't make that stick, all of a sudden Russia probed the election system, scanned the election system. Russia compromised the electoral system. Russia used Facebook and Twitter ads in order to undermine democracy. It was the story, the narrative of this shifted one day after the next as one of the stories after the next, after the next, after the next was taken down. The point, I'm just trying to make a very particular point. There is no way for these guys to know exactly as a flat fact what's taking place. The only thing they can give you is their narrative of events. But there's no way for them to exactly know if their narrative of events is right. That's what I'm trying to say. And I'm trying to say there is a history in the sense of multiple things that the United States has done. And I'm not blaming the US on this. I'm just saying a narrative that's gotten out that wasn't necessarily true, that was nevertheless pushed. No, there weren't weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, regardless of how many times they told you. No, we didn't go into Libya for humanitarian reasons. No, Iran, yes, we did overturn Iran. Yes, it was a CIA plot to overturn Iran. No, we didn't find out till multiple years later after the fact. You can go to one incident after the next. What the public believes and what's being told to the public by the media is not necessarily always indicative of something that's true. That's what I'm trying to get at. That's what I'm trying to establish. That's a lot of words, but I'm trying to make that very specific point. The second part to this, I don't need to go beyond whether or not Seth Rich was the leaker. I don't need to take that extra step. Meaning, whether he was whacked, whether he was killed, whether he accidentally was shot, I don't know. Have nothing to do with it. It's irrelevant to the conversation. That sounds harsh and that sounds callous, but it is somewhat irrelevant to the conversation. We're talking about politics at this point. This is political context. The beginning and ending of it for me is who leaked the information. That information is vitally important. Because who leaked the information and reveals whether or not what they're talking about, this Trump and Russia nonsense, was purely an act, or whether there was something actually there to it. If Seth was the actual leaker, then it means that the media and the parties have been lying to you for over 2 years. I will make the case that they've probably been lying to you for over the last 2 years. And at the very least, whether I know that or not, it is absolutely foreseeable or absolutely possible. And for that matter, is it that, I'll just ask the question, is it possible that somebody who worked for the DNC, that had an opportunity and potential motive to pull and download information from the DNC servers or the DNC computers, had opportunity and motive to release that information to WikiLeaks? The answer is yes. Is it more likely that somebody who worked for the DNC downloaded information for the DNC and gave that information over to WikiLeaks as opposed to the Russians hacking the DNC and releasing that information? Yes. Is it possible that Russia did it? It's possible. Is it more likely that somebody who was working there did it? Yes. It's just as likely, if not more, that somebody who was working there had the potential to do it. Meaning, if he had time, inclination, and motive, then he had time, inclination, and motive. It is not insane to me that there's a potential for this. That's the other part that I kind of want to nail down. So yes, no, the media doesn't necessarily know as a word of God what they're saying. They're pushing a particular narrative. That's the first point. And B, there is a potential, if you're being honest, there is absolutely a potential for the person who worked there to actually get their hands on information or get their hands on information associated with the DNC itself. The third part goes into this idea of the anomalies associated with this and the counter narratives that's being pushed. If Robert Mueller is doing a real investigation, shouldn't he have to deal with that? Like, shouldn't you have to deal with the things that are competing against your narrative? You're putting a narrative out saying Russia hacked us or Russia had something to do with the election process. Fair enough. Don't you have to disprove the competing narratives to get across the idea that your narrative of events is correct? And there are competing narratives on this. Seth being one of those main competing narratives. If Mueller is doing an investigation, at the very least, Mueller has to exclude Rich from this investigation, meaning he has to exclude him as a source, which again goes back to this thing of it requires somewhat of an investigation. Now, why do I bring in this idea of Rich as a source? And why do I bring in this idea that there is some evidence that points to Rich in this scenario? I say this because, first, Democratic Party, all of these guys have somewhat of a political motive in this. Democrats don't want to deal with why they lost that election, and they're doing their best to obfuscate of having to deal with and confront this kind of populist campaign, this populist uprising that they're being confronted with. Democratic regular people, not necessarily the party members, don't understand how the most qualified person in the history of people in any reality frame could lose to reality show hosts. They have no context for that paradigm of the world. They're looking for anything that they can believe in. So they're looking for anything that they can believe in. You have another group of people, for the most part, the media, who went with the narrative, carried water for Democrats from day one, and have stuck with this particular narrative for the last 2 years. they would have to literally repudiate what they've done for the last 2 years to come out and say, our bad, we fucked up. Everybody in this scenario has a dog in the hunt, meaning it's not the easiest thing in the world to figure out who's telling the truth. And certainly when everyone has this kind of incentive to push things a particular way and push their own narratives, it's not the most wisest thing in the world to automatically believe the narratives that are being pushed. Who had access to this information? Who potentially could give you a heads up on whether or not Seth was involved in the process? And if those people are pointing at Seth, shouldn't at the very least Mueller try to exclude this from the process? One of the things that made me say, wow, when I first looked into this was this clip.
First few weeks, if you look at the polls, he needs a miracle. In the American political lexicon, there's such a thing as the October surprise. The stuff that you're sitting on, is an October surprise in there? Do you even know what you're sitting on?
WikiLeaks never sits on material. Whistleblowers go to significant efforts to get us material, and often very significant risks. There's a 27-year-old works for the DNC who was shot in the back, murdered just 2 weeks ago for unknown reasons as he was walking down the street in Washington. So
that was just a robbery, I believe, wasn't it?
No, there's no finding. So
what are you suggesting? What are you suggesting?
I'm suggesting that our sources take risks, and they become concerned to see things occurring like that.
But was he one of your sources then? I mean,
we don't comment on who our sources are.
But why make the suggestion about a young guy being shot in the streets of Washington?
Because we have to understand how high the stakes are in the United States, and that our sources are, our sources face serious risks. That's why they come to us, so we can protect their anonymity.
But it's quite something to suggest a murder. That's basically what you're doing.
Well, that others have suggested that. We are investigating to understand what happened in that situation with Seth Rich.
Understand, that's a mind-blowing clip. The interviewer didn't bring this up. Julian Assange dropped this into the middle of the interview. And in fact, it seemed like he was getting slightly flustered when he realized, oh, right, I've said too much. I injected Seth Rich into this conversation when no one was actually talking about Seth Rich. The context of the conversation was based on this idea of whistleblowers, and he dropped in Seth Rich. Now, does Julian Assange know who's the leaker? Well, the answer is yes. Julian Assange is the person who runs WikiLeaks. You would think that the person who runs WikiLeaks would know who's giving information to WikiLeaks. How can you completely ignore Julian Assange saying this? Even if you wanted to just exclude Rich from the investigation itself, meaning if your hypothesis was this was all the Russians, Rich had nothing to do with it, don't you have to contend with this bit of evidence? How do you contend with this? You could say he's a liar, but that's an easy way to try to bolster a point. Or that's an easy way to try to back up something that you already believe. Yeah, Julian Assange goes further. This little video, this little clip up the top in the little thumbnail. Julian Assange offered $20,000 for people to find the murderer of the person who killed Seth Rich. $20,000. I don't think Julian Assange has ever done that before. He's offering money in order to come down for the person. Now, WikiLeaks never reveals their sources, meaning WikiLeaks never comes out and say this person did that. But he definitely seems as if he is pointing, or at the very least strongly insinuating, that Rich had something to do with this, or at the very least Rich in some way was a whistleblower. This is Seymour Hersh. Seymour Hersh is an award-winning journalist. Let's see. Hersh was a gentleman who came across the My Lai massacre. This is an audio clip.
About the kid, I'll tell you what I know. What I know comes off an FBI report. Don't ask me how you can figure out. I've been around long enough. The kid gets, I don't think he was murdered. I don't think he was murdered because of what he knew. The kid's a nice boy, 27. He was not an IT expert, but he learned stuff. He was a data programmer, but he learned stuff. And so he's living on one street, he's living on about the kid, and I'll tell you what I know. What I know comes off an FBI report. Don't ask me how you can figure out. I've been around long enough. The kid gets, I don't think he was murdered. I don't think he was murdered because of what he knew. The kid's a nice boy, 27. He was not an IT expert, but he learned stuff. He was a data programmer, but he learned stuff. And so he
The system is doing weird things. 1 second, guys. It's like everything started freezing up on me at once. Alright, let's try this one more time. What the hell? Alright, let's try this one more time. This is Seymour Hersh talking about the case. Now, to be fair, Seymour Hersh came back and said this wasn't necessarily the case, and then this came out showing that he himself was actually saying this. He has some feelings about it after the fact, but at the time he did say it. What is going on? Alright, let's try this. I'm going to come back into this. Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on.
But he learned stuff. He was a data programmer, but he learned stuff. And so he's living on one street somewhere. He's living on he's living in a very rough neighborhood. And in the exact area where he'd been, there've been about 10, I'm sure you know this, there've been about 8 or 9 or 10 violent, robberies, most of them with somebody brandishing a gun. And the kid's hands, I'm telling you, I'm sure you know, his hands were marked up. The cops concluded he fought off the people, tried to run, and they shot him twice in the back with a .22, small caliber. And then the kids that did it ran. They got scared, didn't take his role. Okay, so what the cops do then, and here's what nobody knows, what I'm telling you. Now, maybe you know something about it. When you have a death like that, DC cops, if you're...
By the way, just so we're clear, I don't take a position on why he was killed, by the way. I want to make that very clear. It's irrelevant to me in regards to the process. From where I come into this from the political standpoint. Was he the leaker? That's all I want to know. Anything else is up for other people to investigate. Was he the leaker? That has magnificent consequences that goes full well into this political angle. This is kind of the point I'm getting at. Why he was killed or not is kind of besides the point to me. So let's keep going. And the reason I'm adding that in, oftentimes when people are attacking people for bringing this up, they attack people on something that the people never said. Like, I've heard people make these arguments saying, oh, you guys are saying that this guy was rubbed out. I've never made that case. I never cared about that case because my position on this was always, I have no idea. No idea. It is very possible that Rich was the leaker and Rich was accidentally killed. Both of those things are perfectly compatible with one another. So I don't take a position on that part. Let's finish Seymour.
You generally don't just go. You have to find out what's going on. You have to get to the kid's apartment and see what you can find. If he's dead, you don't need a warrant. But most cops get a warrant because they don't know if the guy has a roommate. You need a warrant, so they get a warrant. I'm just telling you, there is such a thing. They go in the house and they can't do much with his computer. It's password. The cops don't know much about it. So the DC cops, they have a cyber unit in DC, and they're more sophisticated. They come and look at it. The idea is maybe he's had a series of exchanges with somebody who says, I'm going to kill you, motherfucker, over a girl. And they can't get in. The cyber guys do a little better, but they can't make sense of it. So they call the FBI cyber.
Just so we're clear here, what Seymour Hersh is saying here makes sense. That's exactly what you would think cops would do. That's the most logical thing in the world. This person was killed. Okay, this person was killed. Is there a reason why this person was killed? And if we're investigating this case, how are we going to go about investigating this case? Maybe he was talking to somebody that often. This is as logical can be. maybe he was talking to somebody, maybe he was interacting with someone, maybe he was supposed to meet someone, maybe we can get some information from somewhere else, and maybe that information is stored on his computer. So let's go back at his computer. That's what Seymour Hersh is saying. Let's keep going. Again, this makes perfect sense from the standpoint of, if you were investigating a case, what would you do with regards to trying to figure out who was the culprit in that particular case? Let's let him keep going.
Unit. The DC unit, the Washington field office, is a hot shit unit. The guy running the Washington field office, he's like a 3-star at an army base. He's already looking for 4. You know what I mean? He's going to go into a top job. There's a cyber unit there that's excellent. What you get in a warrant, the public information you get in a warrant doesn't include. It does not include the affidavit underlying why are you going in, what the reasons are. That's almost never available on. I can tell you that the existence of a warrant is a public document 99% of the time. So they, on the same warrant, they call in the Fed. The Feds get through, and here's what they find. This is according to the FBI report. What they find is he makes, first of all, you have to know some basic facts. One of the basic facts is there's no DNC or Podesta email that exists beyond May 22nd, May 21st, 22nd. It's the last email for either one of those groups. And so what the report says that sometime in late spring, we're talking about June, summer's in June 21st. Late spring would be after, I presume, I don't know. I just say it says late spring, early summer. He makes contact with WikiLeaks. That's in his computer, and he makes contact. Now, I have to be careful because I met Julian 10, 12 years. I stay the fuck away from people like that. And he's invited me, and when I'm in London, I always get a message, come see me as the Ecuadorian ambassador, and there's no fucking way I'm going there. I've got enough trouble without getting photographed by every fucking age. He's under total surveillance by everybody. But anyway, they found what he had done. He had submitted a series of documents, of emails, some juicy emails from the DNC. And, by the way, all this shit about the DNC, whether hacked or wasn't hacked, but whatever happened, the Democrats themselves wrote this shit. You know what I mean? All I know is that he offered a sample, an extensive sample, I'm sure dozens of emails, and said, I want money. That later, WikiLeaks did get the password. He had a Dropbox, a protected Dropbox, which isn't hard to do. I mean, you don't have to be a wizard, IT wizard. He was certainly, he's not a dumb kid. They got access to the Dropbox. He also, and this is also in the FBI report, he also let people know with whom he was dealing. And I don't know how he dealt. I'll tell you about WikiLeaks in a second. I don't know how he dealt with the WikiLeaks and the mechanism. But he also, the word was passed according to the FBI report. I also shared this box with a couple of friends. So if anything happens to me, it's not going to solve your problem. Okay? I don't know what that means. I don't know whether he was, anyway. But WikiLeaks got access, and before he was killed, I can tell you right now, Brennan's an asshole. I've known all these people for years. Clapper's sort of a better guy, but now rocket scientist. The NSA guy is a fucking moron. And they, the trouble with all those guys is that the only way they're going to make it to a board or two and get hired by SAIC to deliver some fat cat contracts is if Hillary stayed in. With Trump, they're gone. They're done. They're going to live on their pension. They're not going to make it. And I got to tell you, guys in that job, they don't want to live on their pension. They want to be on boards like they're make $600,000 for going to 4 visits. I have somebody on the inside. I've been around a long time and I read a lot of stuff. I have somebody on the inside who will go and read a file for me. This person is unbelievably accurate and careful. He's a very high-level guy. He'll do a favor. You're just going to have to trust me. I have what they call it in my business, long-form journalism. I have a narrative of how that whole fucking thing began. It's a Brennan operation. It was an American disinformation, and the fucking president, at one point when they even...
You heard what he said, right? This was a disinformation campaign. All of this was started by Brennan. This was a complete disinformation campaign. This was bullshit. These guys wanted to maintain their jobs and keep their positions, and they understood that if Trump came in, Trump was going to clear house. Seymour Hersh is an award-winning journalist. Even if they want to make an argument that Julian Assange, for whatever reason, has a reason to throw Seth Rich into that conversation, I don't know what his reasons would be, but if he had a reason to do that, what would Seymour Hersh's excuse be? This guy has credentials out the ass. He is a well-known reporter. He is an established reporter. He prints stuff. He's one of those old-style, real investigative journalists, so that part's true. But he has no incentive to lie on this. And he is given a candid interview about what he knows based on his own sources in the FBI. In addition, there's more. I mean, I'm going to put this video at the bottom, but he's making the argument that this is a complete disinformation campaign. And mind you, disinformation by the person who's now working on MSNBC, John Brennan. I find that to be fucking amazing. So there's more. Kim.com, and I have to be honest, I don't know how much credibility Kim.com has, but I'm putting this here anyway. And you can judge it on your own. Because fact is, whether or not Kim.com is legit or not is slightly besides the point. Either he has evidence or he doesn't have evidence. It's one or the other. It's not, you can't have it both ways. If he has evidence that says, yes, this can make the link, this is going to establish the fact that Seth Rich is connected to this, then you should take him up on his offer. You should see what he has to put out. If the goal of this, again, is to have an actual investigation, an investigation meaning you're trying to get to the bottom of what took place, not just the canned narrative or not just political theater, then you at the very least would have to exclude these angles of the case for things that are running a competing narrative. The competing narrative is, this wasn't a leak, or this wasn't a hack, this was a leak. Even, by the way, the speeds themselves. So one of the things, the investigations found, and I'm not going to keep this long because this is going too long, but come on. Come on, come on, come on. Come on. What's going on? My system is doing weird things, guys. Come on. There we are. Come on. There we are. Good. So, this is one more piece right here. If I can bring this up. Kim.com. So, either he has evidence or he doesn't. And either way, if you're investigating this case, it looks like you would try to clear that evidence to see if he has it. And to get to the bottom of whether or not that particular evidence is credible or not. He's being very loud saying, I have evidence, I can make this stick. And apparently he knew well in advance that this was taking place, meaning the leaks. So, this is Zero Hedge. Mueller has been incredibly thorough in his ongoing investigations. However, he won't even respond to Kim.com, the New Zealand entrepreneur who clearly knew about the hacked emails long before they were released. Claims that Seth Rich obtained them with a memory stick and has offered to provide proof that special counsel investigation. Now, the investigation that took place by Benny and VIPs, Veterans Intelligence Professionals, made this point that this wasn't a hack. This was a leak. And the reason that they know it was a leak and not necessarily a hack is because of the speeds of the download. The download was too fast. It was too fast, meaning it was physically impossible for something to be downloaded at that speed if it was being transmitted across the wire. The speeds were more commensurate with somebody putting in a stick and downloading the information on the source. Let's keep going. Let's look at what Kim.com said. Let me assure you, the DNC hack wasn't even a hack. It was an insider with a memory stick. I know this because I know who did it and why. Special Counsel Mueller is not interested in my evidence. My lawyers wrote to him twice. He never replied. 360 pounds. I guess that's his weight. I have no idea what that means. Reminder. Here's the first letter my lawyer wrote to Special Counsel Mueller regarding Seth Rich. We never received any reply. It's astonishing considering my first-hand knowledge of the DNC leak. I knew Seth Rich. I know he was WikiLeaks source. I was involved. Screaming at the top of his lungs, I was involved. Hear me out. Now, Rod Wheeler, this was the other person in this, and I ended on this. I interviewed Rod Wheeler. Rod Wheeler was an investigator that was looking into this for the family, and Rod Wheeler said that he felt like somebody was trying to keep him away from certain things, and that there was information that he was looking for that he was not able to find, that they were trying to push him off the investigation itself. Now, there was this big hullabaloo when it made it look as if he had an FBI contact and an FBI contact was giving him information. Fact is, Wheeler never fully backed away from that position. He only backed away from the language that he used to say it, or at the very least, it came across more expansive than he wanted it to, meaning he didn't back away from his point. He just kind of clarified what he was saying. Look, my point in this is straightforward and rather simple in the argument that I'm trying to make here. If you're actually having an investigation, if this is not just political theater, if you actually want to get to the bottom of what took place and you're not using just the pre-baked narrative of Trump and Russia, and I'm just trying to back up the Trump and Russia narrative. I mean, come on, let's be honest, this is kind of ridiculous. They've made this argument about Trump and Russia collusion, and the only thing up to this point they found was a bunch of Facebook and Twitter ads that they've tried to say was an attempt to undermine democracy. The majority of those ads took place after the election. This is what they're saying. Now you have a bunch of evidence of people saying, I was involved in this. It's not what you guys are saying it is. And this person may have been involved in this process. Nothing to do with who killed him. Haven't even touched that point. The only point that I've gone on is, it is possible that a person who worked at the DNC had access to files at the DNC, may have released the information from the DNC. It is absolutely possible that that took place. And I would even make the case that it is more possible that that took place than this idea that Russia hacked into a system and released information. By the way, why didn't the DNC give over their files to the FBI? They venerated the FBI, the NSA, the CIA as words of God. And yet, in this situation, when they have this attack by supposedly a foreign power, they don't say, let's go to the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Let's go to the body of the United States government, the organ that is supposed to be there for this type of investigation. They went to CrowdStrike. They went to a company that's been somewhat discredited in the information that the company has been putting out. That's the company they went to. One of the more troubling aspects of the VIP's investigation was that information was added to make it look like Russia. Make it look like Russia. If you're actually going to have an investigation of this, if the investigation is honest, if this investigation is not political theater, you have multiple sources saying what these guys are saying is wrong. In addition to having multiple sources saying that what these guys are saying is wrong, you have motives on both sides, whether you want to talk about Democrats, whether you want to talk about the media, and whether you even want to talk about Brennan and some of these other goons that Seymour Hersh is talking about. There's evidence, there's motive, and there's incentive. How can you completely ignore the Seth Rich angle in this case? And if this is an honest investigation, if the goal of this investigation is not to come to some kind of preconceived objective, if the case is being earnest, then at the very least, you have to give some credence to the idea that you would have to investigate the Seth Rich angle, even if it's just to exclude that angle. Why he died is irrelevant to this particular case. What's relevant to it from a political context is whether or not he was a leak. That has magnificent ramifications. And that is definitely something that Mueller should investigate if Mueller is actually doing an investigation. So, I don't know who's going to be here tonight. I hope that argument made sense. Like I said, I don't necessarily hit this one all that often. Yeah, I don't hit this one all that often because, like I said, I don't necessarily want to bathe in the misery of the family in this. But one of my subscribers, one of my patrons asked me to do it. And I do. My patrons have the potential or have the capacity to give me topics that they like and things that they want to hear me talk about. So this was one of the things. There was an article that came out about it recently which kind of added into it, which gave me a little bit more latitude to discuss it. So let's see. Zox Alex, Mueller is wiping evidence against himself and his fellow conspirators. I would not be shocked by that, by the way. I would not be shocked by that, honestly. It's not. I don't take the extra steps in this. So don't misunderstand me. That's why I'm saying I'm trying to be very precise when I talk about this. I hold open the idea that, yes, it's possible that what they're saying is not true. Yeah, absolutely that's possible. Now, the media has screamed at the top of their lungs that anybody who doesn't take their complete narrative of events is a conspiracy theorist. And it's like, you guys are protesting way too loudly on this. They don't know. They're taking a narrative and they're running with the narrative. Their narrative is somewhat preconceived because they've already assiduously stuck to this idea that Trump was associated with Russia, and they bet 2 years of their credibility on Trump is associated with Russia. They have not been able to designate that at all, and they've been sliding around trying to promote this very specific narrative of Trump colluded with Russia. They've not made their point. They've not made their point in the least. So, yeah. I thought it was a decent place to talk about it. Jenny Land, a lot of problems tonight. Ebon's stream was funky too. Yeah, this is slightly weird. I listen to Kim.com, and he's a very smart person who, in my honest opinion, is telling more than the truth. I think that's the thing, man. I don't know. Elephants on coke. Jamal, you need to smoke some weed and go to sleep. Or you smoke too much weed, and that's why you're paranoid. So it's one or the other. It's like either you smoke too much or you don't smoke enough. But either way, you need to work that out. That's awesome. I like that. Ibizolari, Jesus Christ. I heard Seymour clip before. Important one. Thanks for playing. Damn, my live stream keeps freezing. Yeah, it's not just your live stream. Yeah, the Seymour Hersh clip is fucking amazing. Seymour Hersh backed away from this slightly. It sounded like he didn't necessarily want to wade into this particular topic in this particular conversation. Fact is, though, he had him on tape. I don't think he was lying to the person. He was being extremely candid with the person he was talking about. I mean, it would be bizarre if all of a sudden he was lying about this and then he comes back later and repudiates himself. No, it sounds like, more likely than not, he was being honest in the very first time around. He felt like he was being put on the spot with this kind of firestorm. He's a reporter. He's a journalist. He felt his credibility might have been on the line. Yeah, I could see him backing away from it. But that clip, that person who was having the conversation was being very candid and very open about his contacts and about what he understood this to have been. And Seymour Hersh has been doing this for like 40 years. So I think he's earnest. It's back. It's back. The stream is back. We regret our monitors like Mrs. Puff regrets SpongeBob. The whole of monitors. What? That's funny. Well planned in advance, every bit of it, and war propaganda. Exactly. I'm not up. You butchered that. Alright, so I have another video of this. The video itself, if it was skipping or anything like that, I'm going to upload a copy that probably doesn't have the skips and everything else associated with it. So at the very least, at the end of it, I'll be able to upload a better copy. Okay. Good. All right, guys. It's almost 3 in the morning, so I am going to call it a night. I'm going to take Elephant on Coke's advice and either smoke some weed and get some sleep or not smoking enough weed. That's fucking hilarious, dude. That's fucking hilarious. Yeah. All right, guys. You all have a good night. Thank everyone for showing up. Like I said, it's like 2:30 in the morning, so unless you're somewhere else, like West Coast. But all right, guys, if you enjoy the content, feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you guys can always support through PayPal or Patreon. Thanks, everyone, and good night. There you are.